So, Foreign Secretary, the new round of sanctions from EU against Iran was just announced, and they seem to cover a broad set of sanctions from oil industry, oil transportation, to banking and metal exports even. Can you, as the first question, elaborate a little bit on the new round of sanctions and the goal that they're pursuing?
Yes, these sanctions do cover quite a wide range of items. They do cover financial links. This is the full designation under our sanctions of the Central Bank of Iran. They also prohibit export credit finance for exports to Iran. They ban the exports of metals, of naval equipment, of software used to integrate industrial processes. And they also ban the construction of oil tankers for Iran or the export of gas from Iran. So as you can gather, these are serious additional sanctions. We feel this is necessary because negotiations have not yet succeeded with the government of Iran on
How optimistic are
program.
you about the negotiations, talking about sanctions right now?
Well, you know, you have to be an optimist in foreign affairs. You have to believe that we can find a peaceful solution. And I think it's vital for the world, including for the people of Iran, that we find a peaceful solution. So we are going about this with sanctions, but also with negotiations. We are available for negotiations. We've had negotiations this year. We continue to offer Iran assistance, actual help, with a peaceful nuclear industry, with a civil nuclear power industry. And if Iran would take us up on that, instead of doing things that appear to be part of a nuclear military program, then the people of Iran could have good relations with the rest of the world and wouldn't have to face these sanctions.
Talking about relations, specifically diplomatic relations, Foreign Secretary, Iran and the UK are currently going through what might be one of the most severe deadlocks in the diplomatic relation between two countries, with both embassies practically closed down. So how does this situation, in your opinion, affect the approach of Britain and 5+1 toward Iran?
Well, this doesn't affect our approach to the nuclear program. The 5+1, after all, include Russia and China and the United States, France, as well as Britain. Some of them have much better relations with Iran. And we all take a united approach on the negotiations. In addition, the United States and the European Union impose sanctions. It is a pity that we don't have embassies working in each other's countries. But last November, our two embassy compounds in Tehran were stormed violently. And we believe with the cooperation of the authorities in Tehran. So we cannot, in those circumstances, maintain an embassy in Tehran, and therefore I had to close the Iranian embassy in London at the same time.
And how does that change your approach as the diplomatic system of Britain, as Britain to Iran, not as 5+1?
As I say, that hasn't changed our approach to the nuclear program. It makes it more difficult for the people of Iran to get visas because the embassy isn't there. This is a pity, as I say. And so but it doesn't change our approach to the nuclear program. This is a concern of the whole world, that Iran is pursuing a nuclear program and cannot demonstrate to the world, even to independent observers like the IAEA, that this program is for peaceful purposes. And if Iran continues on this path, either they will face a conflict about this, or other countries in the region will develop nuclear weapons as well. And that means a lifetime of insecurity and worry for the people of Iran.
Are you in favor of a regime change in Tehran?
That's up to the people of Iran.
Are you?
Our agenda is not about regime change. I may have opinions about governments all over the world, but we are not in the business of regime change. Our objective in our policies towards Iran is not regime change. We will respect whatever the people of Iran decide, hopefully in a democratic process in the future. But our objective is to settle the issues about the nuclear program. If we could settle the nuclear issues, there wouldn't be sanctions, there wouldn't be this pressure from the Western world on Iran. This is exclusively about the nuclear program.
Foreign Secretary, but on the same note, many believe that the ultimate goal of sanctions is not to change the behavior of Iranian officials, but rather to heighten the pressure on the people to the point that they revolt against the government. So that might be seen as a sort of a tool to change the regime in Tehran, to topple the regime in Tehran.
That's not our objective. In fact, we try to avoid as far as possible in our sanctions those things that have a direct impact on people. We make a humanitarian exemption in our financial sanctions. We exempt things like food imports from our sanctions. So we're not trying to hurt the people of Iran. Of course, there is an impact on the people of Iran of measures that have such a big economic impact. That is inevitable. But wherever we can make sure the people of Iran are not as badly hit as possible, that's what we do. We're hitting the revenues of the government. We're hitting the nuclear program itself. If our objective was to hurt the people of Iran, we wouldn't have all those exemptions for humanitarian
But those
reasons.
are pretty much integrated into each other. As you have said right now and in previous occasions, you're saying that the goal of the sanctions is not to put the pressure on the people of Iran. But from what we hear, what feedback we receive as a media from Iran, they're saying that the sanctions are actually hurting the people of Iran rather than the officials. So don't you think if the EU or the international community does not want to really put the pressure on the people, the mechanism of sanctions have to change a little bit? For instance, the recent currency value crisis in Iran, which was a huge part because of the sanctions, put people under very difficult condition, people both inside Iran and outside Iran.
Well, I would say two things really to that. First of all, I think there are two different things at work here. I think the economic management, the economic leadership of the government of Iran has not been good. This is more for Iranian people to judge. But I don't think the Iranian government has done a good job in that regard. So each country has to take responsibility for its own economic situation. In addition to that, I don't deny at all, as we just discussed, that these sanctions do have some effect on the economy. But our first objective is to put pressure on the government. It's not to hurt ordinary people. Clearly, it will have some impact on ordinary people. But it's in the interests of those same people for this nuclear dispute to be settled. The worst thing for the people of Iran is for Iran to continue with its nuclear program at the moment, which will lead either to a war or it will lead to nuclear proliferation around the Middle East.
There have been examples of countries who have been under sanction for years, even decades. But the government eventually did not change its course, Cuba being one of the most notable examples in that regard. What makes you think that the sanctions would change the course of the Iranian regime?
Well, these are strong sanctions. They do have a big impact. Of course, we cannot guarantee at all from outside Iran that this will change the course of the government. But it is better than any other approach. We are trying to avoid conflict. We're trying to come to a peaceful negotiation. So all the time with sanctions, we are offering credible negotiations at the same time. Every other approach has failed. Negotiations without sanctions has not succeeded. We don't want to see a conflict with people being killed. So this is the best policy consistent with a peaceful solution to the Iranian nuclear program, and we hope now the government of Iran responds with a serious and credible participation in those negotiations.
And as a last question, I wanted to ask you that Israeli Prime Minister has been campaigning for a while now to set a new red line for Iran's nuclear activities, well ahead of the previous red line, which was acquiring nuclear weapons. Now he's saying that this is not enough. The red line has to be acquiring the capability to produce a nuclear weapon. Now many critics are out there who's saying that due to the ambiguity and abstractness of the word capability, this might be a precursor to go to war with Iran. I wanted to know that where does Britain stand in that regard, in regards with red line with the nuclear program?
We're not setting any red line, we haven't set any deadline, but we can say this is becoming a more urgent crisis. As the Iranian nuclear program continues, the number of nuclear centrifuges is increased, the amount of uranium that is enriched is increased, then this crisis becomes bigger, it becomes more urgent, it becomes more threatening, I think, to Iran. And it's because it is becoming more urgent that we have adopted these measures here in Europe today.
So do you agree with the Israeli Prime Minister or not to set that
He states his
line?
position, we state our position. We haven't set red lines, but we say it is becoming much more urgent.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Foreign Secretary.